Welcome to the VMI Leader Journey podcast. This podcast shares authentic insights on leadership from the perspectives of VMI cadets, staff, faculty, alumni, and VIP speakers who visit Post. I'm your host, Major Roy, Communications and Marketing Manager for the Center for Leadership and Ethics, and this is Season 3, Episode number 5. If you're interested in learning more about VMI's honor system, today's episode is a good one. My guest is Sibi Bagavathy, VMI Class of 2023. Bagavathy is the Vice President of Education for the Honor Court, and in this episode, we discuss VMI's honor system. Thank you for joining us on today's Leader Journey. Today we are here with Cadet Sibi Bagavathy, and he is VMI Class of 2023 and a member of VMI's Honor Court. So, Sibi, if you could just introduce the audience to yourself and maybe a little bit about how you came to be at VMI.
Absolutely. So I'm Sibi. I'm an economics and business major here and a first class cadet. So me coming to VMI, I really wasn't set on this school 6 months before I committed to here. I really wanted to go into the military. My grandfather was an officer in the Indian Army, and but to me, I just wanted to go into the military. I wasn't really keen on the whole senior military college aspect of things. And to me, I think that the appeal of just being able to go be a normal college student and do Air Force RTC at a normal school was what I was set on. And then I think this kind of changed a lot for me when I attended an S5 open house. So this gave cadets the opportunity to stay overnight, spend the night with a cadet, go to different Q&A sessions, and really kind of get to know what a cadet does at VMI, their day-to-day activities and everything. And I think this is a very cliche thing to say, but that was kind of my turning point. I was like, okay, wow, there's a lot of really cool things going on here, and I kind of just fell in love with the school and decided to commit to it.
And what year in high school were you when you did that?
So I did my open house actually very late. I did it in March.
Your senior year?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So I did in March. Again, I really came here on the expectation that I'm going to go to another college, normal college, just do Air Force RTC. I really just only came here because my parents said, you know what, at least give it a shot. And for lack of a better term, I fell in love with the school when I came here.
And are you a Virginia resident?
I am, yes, ma'am.
Where from?
Ashburn, Virginia.
Okay. And what was your high school experience like?
So my high school experience, it's not really that many people that actually went to the military out of my high school, specifically VMI. I'm actually the first one from my high school to attend VMI too. So I didn't really have too many contacts back at home. So I came here with a pretty open mind. I really hadn't talked to anyone from VMI at all. So it was definitely quite the eye-opening experience seeing the sandcastle for the first time. But yeah. And
had you done any overnight trips to other colleges that had ROTC programs to compare it with, or you just were like, I'm sold?
So I'd visit other schools. And again, I think that's really kind of what got me is the idea that, wow, I could live like a normal college student, but then still achieve that commission in the Air Force, which I strive for upon graduation. And I can't really put it on one specific thing. Maybe it's just the way the cadets on the S5 staff conducted themselves or my actual open house host. But it was a very quick decision for me to make once I came here. I really saw what the school's about.
Well, very interesting. And your economics and business
Yes,
major?
ma'am.
Mm-hmm. And how's that been?
It's actually a very challenging major. I think a lot of people associate business with being the easy major in a lot of colleges. Maybe it's not always the case, but I think here we have really great faculty. It's very challenging coursework in my eyes, and I've had a great time in the major. And
are you working on a capstone project now? Or
I am in capstone currently. So we're actually doing a business simulation, and it's been pretty interesting, kind of to everything we've learned throughout ECBU, putting them all together in one in this online simulation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good. Well, congratulations on your accomplishments, and I understand you're also a member of the Honor Corps.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk a little bit about how that came to be? Is that something that you considered as you started here, or what was that journey like?
Absolutely. So I think I started off, it was really during my open house. I keep tying it back to then, but they talked about the honor code then, and I always found it really interesting, the idea that you could just leave your stuff. I mean, our doors don't have locks on them, or they're rarely ever even locked in barracks, and I could leave my wallet right in the middle of the courtyard in barracks, and I could leave it there for a month, and nobody would touch any money out of there. And it's just it's almost a very utopia-esque feeling, and I think when I was a high school student, that's what I really took away from it. And I remember another thing too was they always talked about how you'll see money taped to the walls of barracks, and as a high school student, I'm like, that's got to be a joke. There's no way. And then coming here as a rat, legitimately seeing that, and it's not an uncommon thing to see even now, just when I'm walking to class. So I always thought that's pretty cool. But in terms of me being on the honor corps, I had the privilege of, at the end of my third class year, actually being elected by my brother rats to the system. It really was quite literally an honor to me. I wasn't really expecting to be put in those shoes, but I think I've been able to contribute a lot to the corps. I've been able to learn a lot, develop myself. But essentially, as an overview, though, VMI Honor Corps consists of 14 cadets, 7 first-class cadets, and 7 second-class cadets. And we uphold a single-sanction honor system, and it's completely cadet-run. So there's different positions in the Corps. So this year, I'm the vice president for education. So my job consists of making sure the Corps is well educated within our system. So everything from having Corps briefs talk about different permits all the way through right when rats get here, trying to essentially acclimate them to the new Blue Book and all the rules they're expected to follow as a VMI cadet.
Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about your role specifically then as Vice President of Education. Do you lead those briefs, and do you have to develop your own material for those, or is there some partnership with the Commandant staff or other, let's call them adult overseers for lack of a better word?
Oh, no, absolutely. So it's kind of interesting because I think there's 2 aspects to my position as VPE. And one aspect of it is with the rats, and we do multiple different things with the rats. We try to get as much face time with them as we really can. So some things that I do really involves disseminating down throughout the honor court. So we have company reps. So if a rat has an honor court question, they can go to this specific company representative. Additionally, whenever we do small group briefs, I can't duplicate myself into 10 different companies. So it's partially my responsibility to actually educate the rest of the court to make sure I set my expectations straight for what we want to accomplish through these briefs or this education session. So I'll give an example. One type of small group education we do is jury training. So the VMI Honor Corps, the way it operates is if a cadet stands a trial, it's not the Honor Corps that actually decides whether a cadet's guilty or not. It's a group of randomly selected peers who do this. And once a cadet breaks out and they're a 4th class cadet, they're actually eligible to be on this jury pool. So one education, we actually go through a redacted case from several years ago. And this is done in a small group setting just so rats are kind of able to ask their questions. They're more engaged in the small group. And then on the other side, you do have the more big groups with the entire rat mass or the entire corps where we talk about things. I think one thing...
And so, if I can interrupt you for a second, so most of the training, it sounds like, happens the rat year. In terms of the introduction to the court and then jury training,
I would say
stuff
so.
like that. Are there then repeated briefs, like after your 4th class year? Do you get more like a primer or a refamiliar? There may have been rule changes or there may have been procedures that changed.
Yes, ma'am. So it's really that rat year where they get the most face time with honor court representatives because us as an honor court, our goal for their first year is to make sure they're extremely malleable, they're sponge, there's all this information they have to learn. Well, after that, it's more just trying to keep or instill the intrinsic motivation that cadets have here with the honor system. But it's very interesting that we have to take a very different approach with that compared to what we do with the rats. And what I mean with that is, theoretically, we could sit down with the Corps every month or every week and go over the honor system and the importance of it. But would that really be effective if we just sat down with them and said, this is the honor system, don't lie, cheat, steal? And in my eyes, I think the answer is no. I think you have to be a lot more tactful with how you approach the old Corps. I'm not saying that the old Corps doesn't appreciate us or wouldn't benefit from it, but it's rather that everyone has things going on here, and the last thing we want to do is essentially add more things to a cadet's schedule when
more briefs.
Right. So whenever we approach old Corps, it's always a lot more tactful. Whenever we do briefs, we make sure that there's information that that can't just be sent on an email. But additionally, yeah, we do our best to stay very approachable in the Corps. So this goes from everything in our doors. We actually have little Q&A cards with a QR code on it, and essentially it has page numbers for the Blue Book. So for example, people have questions about how to use a certain permit. They can just quickly go to that by looking at our door if we're not in our rooms per se. Additionally, one thing with, and again, I just mentioned this, but it's the whole idea about having honor versus being honorable. And I think that's a big thing that we want to focus on to the whole Corps, because a cadet can...
So when you say you want to focus on the distinction, and would you say that you're trying to move the Corps toward just having honorable character versus here's a set of rules, don't break the rules?
Yes, ma'am, exactly. So because a cadet can go through the entire cadetship and not break the honor code, but that doesn't necessarily make them an honorable person.
Right.
Following the honor code is essentially that bare minimum expectation as a cadet, but what we really want to instill in cadets is the idea that you want to do the right thing when no one's watching, even if it's not necessarily lying, cheating, nor stealing.
Now, before we started our interview, I had the opportunity to ask you if you had taken the Lead 344 course, and the discussion on that very term that you were just mentioning, that description of doing the right thing when nobody's looking, that's the definition of integrity. And I think that is something that at the center, one of our objectives is to be integrated into cadet life and into the VMI system, the three-legged stool system, with the honor system being as the seat. Then you've got academic, military, and physical training or physical development as the three legs. And so it is a challenge because of this, there's the saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Right.
And so you can teach, what honorable character looks like. You can say it's important to have integrity, but until that person decides, I want to aspire to have that kind of reputation and I'm going to work toward it, it's just a set of rules. How about yourself, if you can talk about that, when you got to VMI and over the course of your cadetship, have you worked on specifically developing your own character and sense of integrity?
Absolutely. And I think, again, this really comes down to the people that you look up to at the school. I think is a really big factor. So, for example, I know when I was a rat, of course I had my dykes, but one person I really looked up to was actually my honor corps representative. And he kind of really always talked about this, and he would regularly send our company emails out essentially talking about that thing. And he always ended his emails with, be honorable. And I think that kind of resonated a lot with me in the sense that I think the biggest thing with that is seeing somebody else essentially embody what they say and
walking the talk.
Exactly. And I think that's something that as an honor corps, as a leader at VMI, people should always strive for, because again, it's very easy to tell a rat, hey, your shoes look bad. But if a rat looks down at the person that's correcting them, look at their shoes, and they're also dirty, I don't think they're really going to get much out of it. And I think that's applicable to multiple facets of VMI and building character. But no, to answer your question, though, I think a lot of me kind of coming here, developing as a person, has come from finding other mentors at VMI, learning from them, being able to kind of pick their brain a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Is there any concern that all this information coming at them kind of turns them into what I call deer in the headlights? Like you've met maximum saturation and you can't take it in anymore. Is there any concern over that, or have you seen that happen?
I think, yes, that's something that every single year, naturally it's going to happen. I know when I was a rat, I was, and again, that kind of goes back to thinking about having a good mentor, and I would always rely on my honor corps representative whenever I had questions to reach out to them. And I think it is an issue every year, and it's kind of, it falls on me, it falls on the court to be a little bit creative in how we approach that. So, for example, this year, one thing that we do is we actually did a series of quizzes throughout the rat line, and these quizzes essentially covered general questions. For example, you see a cadet doing X, how do you respond to this? Mm-hmm. Or you signed out on this permit, but you did this. Do you need to put yourself in a report? Questions like that. And essentially we go through this data,
And how do you administer those kinds of quizzes? Are you using Qualtrics or?
We actually use Google Forms. I think next year Qualtrics is another good idea. I think that both platforms have their benefits and issues, or issues is not the right word, but either way.
Benefits, yeah.
Right, yeah. And I think the biggest thing about these quizzes we've been able to pull out is looking at this data, we've seen if 25% of the rat mass is getting this question incorrect, maybe we need to kind of reposition our education initiatives that focus on one specific thing.
Oh, that's a great idea.
I think that's helped a lot with reinforcing values. Additionally, we've also, one thing that we've done this year too is we've looked at past dismissals we've had or dropouts we've had and tried to reposition or focus on those things during educations.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, plagiarism is something that the Honor Corps sees every year. So this year we actually worked with Preston Library staff in there, and essentially they provide a brief to the rats, keeping in mind the different types of plagiarism and how to avoid them, just so this is not an issue in the future.
Do you think that some, I'm thinking about plagiarism, lying and cheating. I've seen those three instances happen as a result of students who are falling behind. There's, of course, time management is a really big skill that cadets here have to develop, and they're stressed on this constantly in terms of all the things that you all have to do in a day and over the course of a week. And goodness forbid if you've got a conflict with like NCAA sports, or if you're off post for a conference or something. So I find that those three could have a common issue or core issue being that they just fall behind in their studies. Would you agree with that, or do you find that to be the case?
So I think you bring up a great point there. I think every VMI cadet is very busy. We always have things going on in our schedule, but and I think that falls partially on us too, in the sense that it's important for us to basically instill that value of making that hard right over the easy wrong. And I agree, it can be tough. Let's say you're in a club and you've been off post for 2 weeks and you come back and you have an assignment due that night. But I think that's kind of the importance of where time management comes into play. And additionally, there's always avenues that you can go through before you actually before you resort to something like cheating. And that does go into another thing about the Honor Corps or honor system itself, and that's the idea of intent. I think we can kind of always get that image, and there will be that inherent fear given we're single sanctioned, but we're not out to simply get people. We look at cases or any reports you may receive and look at and see, truly did this cadet have the intent to do this, and did they gain personal gain from it? And if they don't hit those things, that's not something that we're responsible to do. It could be maybe adjudicated by a different cadet organization. But
there could still be a situation where, yes, they intended to cheat because they were cutting corners, because they were falling behind in a course and really needed to get a grade. So I wonder if there's, as a mom, I have 3 boys myself, I would just say that I think it's important to really focus, especially as your rat year, on those class objectives, which is lead self is the first one. So as a rat, as a 4th, your goal in terms of personal development is to learn how to lead yourself. And that involves some discipline. What are my values? What kind of character do I have? And what kind of character do I aspire to have? Because there's certainly enough opportunities for those aspects of your character to be tested. But it's a matter of overcoming those obstacles and developing some lifelong habits of discipline, study, and doing the regular things regularly so that you can achieve and not fall behind and be desperate, basically. I think sometimes students in general get themselves into a corner.
I agree with that too. And I think one of the things you really got to learn as a VMI cadet is you only have 24 hours in a day. There's some times when you might not be able to get everything you want to get done within a day, but sometimes you just need to admit when, or you need to take the L, admit when you're at fault, or when this means getting a poor grade on an assignment. But any grade at VMI is not worth your cadetship, and I think that's something we always want to put stomp. And it's the idea that yes, your cadetship can get very tough at times, but it's important that you stay true to your values, that especially as a rat, you really develop when you're leading yourself. And again, our true intention with that is hopefully they carry that out throughout their cadetship and once they commission or graduate in the civilian sector.
Now, having worked on a couple of cases myself as a defense advocate volunteer, one of the things that I've stressed to a couple of cadets that I've counseled is to say to them, it's not because, for example, if things go badly and they end up getting drummed out or they end up OPing, out processing, I've told them there's no reason why the goodness of the VMI system can't follow you. Because even though you couldn't cut it here because we are single sanction, doesn't mean that you can't take those lessons and be successful somewhere else. And so I've tried to emphasize that just so that they could leave with some sense of, okay, I fell down, but now I can get back up again.
Oh, no, I agree with that absolutely. Because I think one of the biggest things that as a court, this is the way we've always operated, is whenever a cadet is found guilty of an honor violation, yes, they committed an honor violation, they broke the honor code, we're single sanctioned, so they can no longer be a cadet. However, that doesn't make them a bad person. That just means that they don't deserve to wear a ring or wear the VMI uniform. And
I would say it's more, maybe not deserve might be a bit of a harsh word, but you didn't cut it. You may have made some what I call rookie mistakes because you guys are young.
Yes, ma'am. No, I agree.
From where I sit, you guys are pretty young, so I call those rookie mistakes, but a very costly one, unfortunately. But yeah, I think they can go on from here.
Right, and there's plenty of stories of cadets that have been dismissed from VMI who are now doing great things in the world. So I agree. There's being drummed out from VMI doesn't mean that your life is over. You're a horrible person, and it just means that you made a mistake. You're not a VMI cadet, but there's plenty of opportunities out in the world for you. And you will carry all the lessons you've learned from VMI throughout your cadetship.
Absolutely. Any advice that you have for other students or prospectives who are considering coming here with regard to the honor system?
So I think as VMI as a whole, to me, it's very easy to think that, okay, you go into college or say that you want to go into college, challenge yourself with new opportunities, everything. But I think VMI specifically, if you want to challenge, you want to legitimately develop your character because, at least in my experience, I think the whole idea of having this honorable, acting in an honorable manner, doing the right thing when no one's watching is something that's kind of fading from society to an extent. And I think VMI has really held true to that. And if you want a legitimate challenge at VMI, you want to leave with it as a person of character. It's a great place for you to develop your skills.
I agree with that. I thank you. Well, thank you very much for your time today, and I wish you luck as you commission. You're going to be commissioning in the...
Yes, ma'am. I'm going to be commissioning as an intelligence officer in the United States Air Force.
Oh, wow. Excellent. And will you have any of this kind of court experience? Do you think that'll help you with going forward?
I think indirectly it will. I think I've really kind of learned how to be a great leader, being on the honor court, and as a leader in the United States Air Force, I think hopefully I'll carry many of the values I've learned here as a VMI cadet.
Excellent. And thank you again for your time today, and best of luck to you in the future.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
On behalf of the VMI Center for Leadership and Ethics, staff, and faculty, we thank the following. Mr. Caleb Minus, VMI Class of 2020, for the intro and backing music. Find more of his musical stylings on his Instagram page at MYNUS Official. Colonel David R. Gray, PhD, U.S. Army retired, VMI Center for Leadership and Ethics Executive Director. Find our podcast episodes with transcripts, CLE publications, and information about our staff and faculty, programs, and events on our website at www.vmi.edu/CLE. Thank you for listening. Please like this episode and subscribe to our channel.